This story falls into the kind of the category of conspiracy or coincidence. Or maybe it would be better to say coincidence or conspiracy. Here's what's going on in Virginia. You know, they've got an election next Tuesday, a week from tomorrow, in Virginia, first Tuesday of November. For the there's a bunch of state offices that are up for grabs, but the main one is the governor's race. And you got Terry McAuliffe, who used to be was the former Democratic governor of Virginia, then went on to become the head of the Democratic Party, the DNC, and has, kind of kicked around politics for most of his life. He's been on the show a number of times. He's not my favorite Democrat. He's kind of a neoconservative, or historically was kind of a neoconservative Democrat. But increasingly, even the neocon Democrats are becoming Joe Biden Democrat. I mean, Joe Biden was, right? And now he's becoming kind of a Bernie-crat. The Democratic Party is actively, right across the board, largely, going back to its progressive roots, to LBJ's Great Society, to Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. Wouldn't it be nice if the Republican Party could go back to its progressive roots, go back to Teddy Roosevelt's Square Deal, But anyhow, dream on, Hartmann. Yeah, I get it. So there's an election next week, and it's a real high-stakes election, and you've got Democrats and Republicans running. And one of the things that we know about mail-in voting is that, broadly speaking, right across the country, Fox News tends to be a primary information source for Republican voters, and Fox News minimizes the importance of vaccines and masks. And so, as a consequence of that, Republican voters are less likely to ask for an absentee ballot and vote by mail. And Democratic voters, on the other hand, get most of their news from, at least the cable universe, from CNN and MSNBC and Free Speech TV. And as a consequence, they understand the dangers of COVID, and they're more likely to say, I'd really rather not go vote in person. Please send me a ballot. So if you can diminish the number of mail-in ballots, you diminish the number of Democratic voters. Now, that part is not conspiracy theory. That is well known, and it's one of the reasons why there have been 33 laws passed now in 19 states making it harder to vote. And the one thing in particular that is common among all those 19 states is that they're making it harder to get an absentee ballot. They're making it harder to send in an absentee ballot. In some cases, they're requiring people to have like a photograph of their driver's license or a scan of their driver's license. And then in a couple of states, even that you have to go to a notary, to like a bank, and have that notarized as, yes, this is actually his driver's license. And then you mail that in with your mail-in ballot. So they're doing everything they can to make it hard for mail-in voting, because that's something that Democrats are using during this time of pandemic. And then, of course, we have Louis DeJoy, the Postmaster General, who has, who dismantled over 200 high-speed sorting machines that cost millions of dollars each to slow down the mail just in time for Donald Trump's election. This was part of the Trump plan, and it's fairly well known now. Some pieces of it still, I suppose, fall into the category of conspiracy theory, but it was clearly discussed in the Trump White House. And so now in Virginia, the Democratic Party just filed a lawsuit. They did this Friday, right after we got off the air. So I'm picking it up here on Monday. They are saying that there are a couple of counties, Albemarle County and Portsmouth County, that went Democratic in the last election, in the last governor's race in 2017. And in those counties, plus a third county, James City County, which was more kind of on the knife's edge, it did go for Ed Gillespie, the Republican, in the last election. But in these three counties, the Democratic Party is saying that up to a quarter of all the ballots that were requested by people have not yet been delivered to them by the post office. Now, the post office received the ballots. This is a quote from the lawsuit. Quote, "Thousands of ballots delivered to postal facilities by the general registrars weeks ago are still outstanding, and weeks later have not yet even been scanned into the United States Postal Service's system." even if these voters do eventually receive their ballots before Election Day, which keep in mind is next Tuesday, the slowdowns promise that they will not have sufficient time to send them back with assurance that they will arrive in time to be counted. And then the lawsuit goes on to say, and even if the ballot reaches the appropriate election officials before the receipt deadline, if the official identifies any issues that require remediation before it can be counted, the voter will have run out of time to rectify the problem. You know, sometimes people forget to sign their ballots, or they mark two things the wrong way, or they mark something, or they put X's rather than filling in circles or whatever. And typically what happens is the election people, if there's enough time, they'll contact those voters and say, you know, you messed up your ballot. You want to try again? And get it right. But in Virginia, because Louis DeJoy's post office, I mean, these ballots were dropped weeks ago, and they haven't even been scanned into the system to be delivered in these three counties. These three counties that probably will be the counties that decide the outcome of the Virginia election. What the hell is going on with the post office? I'm sharing this with you from a story over at CNN Politics. It's titled, Virginia Democrats Sue USPS Over Delayed Delivery of Election-Related Material. And this is pretty shocking stuff. Glenn Youngkin, of course, is the Republican in that race running against Terry McAuliffe. Glenn Youngkin is a full-blown Trumpy Republican who has been basically refusing to talk about being a Trumpy Republican, and instead has been talking about how schools should not mandate masks and should not teach critical race theory. And of course, critical race theory is not taught in any elementary school, middle school, or high school in the United States. Never has been. Zero. None. Critical race theory is a part of the education in law school, and it has to do with how essentially structural barriers in the law have a racial impact. So critical race theory is like this kind of esoteric law school class that you can take. It is not taught in any school, any public school in America, and never has been. Never. And yet, this is the thing that Glenn Youngkin is going, oh my God, we got to stop this, and he's got people whipped up to the point where they're going to school board meetings and they're threatening school board members and picketing their houses and saying, we know where you live, and you're going to go down in flames, and we're going to. And it turns out, as has now been exposed, that many of the people involved in this, specifically in Virginia, have ties to this right-wing billionaire network and the think tanks and the Tea Party and all these things that they have been funding for years. Excuse me. They just, the idea of, from the right-wing billionaire's point of view, the idea that anybody in America should get anything from the government that they have to pay for with their tax dollars is completely anathema to them. No, we do not want to pay for anything. We want to keep our money in our money bins so that every morning we can we can jump up, get up on the diving board and dive in like Scrooge McDuck, right? But we do not want to pay taxes. And because we do not want to pay taxes, therefore there shouldn't be public schools. Let's just go all private schools. Maryland tried that after the 1954 Brown v. Board case, or at least Prince George's County did. They shut down all their schools for a year rather than integrate them. But I think this goes beyond just race. This, I think, has to do with you've got a bunch of right-wing billionaires who don't want to pay taxes. I mean, why should they, right? Their kids don't go to public schools. They don't go through public airports. They fly in private jets. They don't even have to go through security. I mean, why should they care about any infrastructure in the United States? They don't, actually. That's what it comes down to.